be here today, you know, because to have a little idea that's actually grown into a real thing is overwhelming, overpowering, and I can't thank you all enough for coming. But the first thing I want to say is, we shouldn't be here. I'm so angry that we shouldn't have to do this. We shouldn't have to climb into our cars. We shouldn't have to climb onto trains to be doing this. Why? There's something very wrong, isn't there?
Yeah.
And I think we're all feeling that. We're all fed up. What I'm trying to do today with this talk, which I'm going to have to read because Kim said to me, "Oh, you couldn't talk about anything." And it was like the dawn chorus in my head. It was going crazy, so I thought the only way I can do this is to put my words down, because it's just impossible otherwise. So I do hope you'll bear with me, because I'm going to be reading it out. I might have to edit, which I'm not very good at on the hoof. So here goes. I want to start with a poem. And it's a poem that, well, it tore at my heartstrings. And it was written by a teacher. It was written by a teacher just after the war. And he lost all his comrades on the boat that he was serving in. He happened to be on land at the time. And he came back and he taught in the village school that he'd always worked at previous to that, and that he'd gone to as a child. And so he was a real community man. And this is about one of the boys that he taught. And the point of my talk is, these kids are always here, but sometimes they're in this position, they're in this wretched position, simply because of government policies which should never have been implemented and which were crazy to begin with, and we're going to have bad consequences. And this is what we've been putting up with for years and years and years. Not just me, my mother, my grandmother, my great-grandmother. This is historical. So there's something really, really bad going on in our society when this is carrying on. And I just hope I'm putting my point forward enough for you to understand that that is where I'm coming from. You know, who are the people doing it? What kind of people are imposing this on us? Because we can't relate to them. They're not the kind of people that we really want to mix with. And yet we're having to fight them in a polite way. None of us want to be polite. Oh, I thought there was going to be a picture up behind me of me somewhere or other. I wasn't looking forward to it, but I just wanted to say that this trip that I've been on with PCP, I can never say it. Honest to God, every time I say PCPW, I have to really concentrate on it, you know? It's crazy. But this trip has been, well, it's had me standing for Parliament. That was fun. It's had me, what else? It's had me in bits. It's had me hysterical with laughter. It's taken me all over the place. And it's also taken me to a cell for 10 hours. And I don't recommend it to anybody who's got a gourmet appetite, because the only thing they offered me was a Frosty bar for 10 hours. Honest to God. But that's another story. So here's the poem, and it's by Charles Causley. I don't know if anyone's ever heard of him. It's got some very moving poems, and I really hope I can do it justice. I've spilt water all over it, so bear with me. Timothy Winters is the name. Timothy Winters comes to school with eyes as wide as a football pool. Ears like bombs and teeth like splinters. A blitz of a boy is Timothy Winters. His belly is white, his neck is dark, and his hair is an exclamation mark. His clothes are enough to scare a crow, and through his breeches the blue winds blow. When teacher talks, he won't hear a word, and he shoots down dead the arithmetic bird. He licks the pattern off his plate, and he's not even heard of the welfare state. Timothy Winters has bloody feet, and he lives in a house on Suey Street. He sleeps in a sack on the kitchen floor, and they say there aren't boys like him anymore. Old man Winters likes his beer, and his missus ran off with a bombardier. Grandma sits in the grate with a gin, and Timothy's dosed with an aspirin. The welfare worker lies awake, but the law's as tricky as a 10-foot snake. So Timothy Winters drinks his cup and slowly goes on growing up. A morning prayers the master helves for children less fortunate than ourselves, and the loudest response in the room is when Timothy Winters says, Amen. So come on, angel. Come on, 10. Timothy Winters says, Amen. 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 Timothy Winters, Lord, Amen. So that was the poem. And Charles Causley said, people always ask me whether this was a real boy. My God, he certainly was. Poor old boy, I didn't know where he is now. I was thunderstruck when people thought I'd made it up. He was a real bloke. Poor little devil. And we all know so many poor little devils, don't we? I remember one that used to come to my house, a little London boy. He was a poor little devil. He used to sleep under his sister's bed. His mother worked at night, put it that way. And he showed me the mask that the man of the house, whoever he was, used to kick him up to bed with. Used to frighten him with the mask and kick him up to bed, as he said, little East End boy. So we've got these people in our society, and parents are always going to go wrong. But what does the state do about it? What kind of tactics do they take in order to deal with it? So I want to go back a little bit in history, if you don't mind, just to show how our government can be kind and thoughtful towards children not. So I think that poem sums up the reason why we all come here today. Because we hate to see children in distress and feel an urge to help when we witness it. I mean, who doesn't? It has to take a weird person not to, doesn't it? And why do so many people seem to find our message so hard to accept? These are things that we at PCPW have often pondered on. We hit on the idea that perhaps some of the people who refuse leaflets on the street, you get that all the time, people put their head down and just walk past, that some of these people might perhaps be unable to accept them because of some kind of previous trauma. But what can you say of the people that are actually causing the damage and the trauma right now? It looks like they don't see children in that protective and concerned way. The same ones that use them as a bargaining chip, or a way to make money, or even save money. What kind of people are they? When we look back over the years, it seems obvious that they've been there all the time, hiding in plain sight, these kind of people. Childhood trauma and the British state's role in it is not an uplifting title for a talk, and I do apologise in advance. However, I think it's necessary conversation and one not heard often enough. How child-centred is our government? And for that matter, how child-centred are we as a nation, a people, not just a government, a people? We know that we're a nation of dog lovers, that much goes without saying, but just how much funding, research and thought goes into government initiatives to improve children's lives at the point of most need. And most need for a lot of children is so critical. If they don't get that treatment, that help that they need at a particular time in their life that's critical, they can be goners for the rest of the time. You know, I've seen children, when I've been working as a home tutor, that barricaded themselves in the bedroom and wouldn't come out. That boy was 15 at the time, he's 30 odd now, he's still on tranquilizers. He's got a life back, but it's a reduced life. And reduced lives, we all need our potential, and we all need our potential for this particular fight. Maybe that's why some people aren't standing up, because they haven't got it within them, because they're too wounded. So after reading some of the stories of the victims that I'm talking about now, the problem is that it's not just the government that were hurting these children, it was also the general public and their perception of them. I mean, you know, think of the grooming gangs and the kind of perception, the kind of nasty arrogance that people had against those children who were in desperate need of an arm around them, desperate need of someone to understand them, not blame them. So maybe all the blame doesn't lie at the door of the government. That's equally worrying in some ways. Because what do we do about us? What do we do about people that aren't responding? The public. Because we all need to be clamouring. So I can't help wondering how much lack of empathy might be caused by trauma that's laying dormant. Whether that trauma has happened to a rich little boy sent to public school who cries himself to sleep many the night. And that's not nice. You know, they may be rich, but they've got feelings like anyone else, and they're going to be harmed by this process. And I'm sure they have. I think the BBC has done a series about it. I don't know how good it is, and I don't recommend the BBC anyway, but occasionally they pull something out of the bag. So there is something on the iPlayer, whatever it's called, sounds. So if it's a boy who is from a privileged background, or if it's a poor child that's witnessing domestic abuse at home, it's bad. Doesn't matter which way you look at it. And there are still forms of abuse, and both types of children pay the price, whether they become a politician or a scaffolder. Doesn't make any difference. They might both suffer from the same detachment and lack of trust as each other, both symptoms of childhood trauma. If that is the case, then there is a good chance that our politicians and legislators, our ministers and people of high influence might all have been victims of abuse. I mean, just think about the RSC curriculum. There has to be some pretty dark seed that spawned the worst elements of that. The minds that created that do not come cheaply. They do not have the mild manner of Timothy Winters, who is abused, but he doesn't even realise it, and he's praying for the other little children in need. They're not like that, because they see children as dispensable in the name of a greater cause very often, or it might be expediency, you know, money, might be saving money, might even be making money on children. So there are means to an end, whether it's climbing a greasy pole for an academic, or selling them life-changing operations and medication. This is a quote from Professor E.J. Reynolds, who we all know about. And I think this is one of her pet beliefs, to be honest with you. Let me see. Okay, so what did she write in... I don't even want to say the name of her books. I don't want to give her that much respect. I mean, she's written words. They're not books to me. Much of the neglect surrounding children's sexualities stems from a historical and current preoccupation with the conceptualization of children and childhood as innocent and innocence. See her English? It's weird. So what she's saying is that children aren't really innocent, and childhood doesn't have such a thing as innocence attached to it. That's what she's saying. And she goes on, it gets worse. She puts a bracket, oh, hang on a minute. This is the important bit. Indeed, the historical separation of children from the adult world, or othering of children. See, othering? How can you make other a verb? It's never been a verb in my life until now. It's hinged wholly on children's exclusion from, she's put a bracket round it, but let's say it, adult sexuality. I'll read it again. The historical separation of children from the adult word or othering of children has hinged wholly on children's exclusion from adult sexuality. So what does that mean? Okay, so that's enough of this woman, actually. Does she mean adult or doesn't she? She put a bracket round it, but it's still there. She basically is on fire to see children in a sexualized world belonging to adults. And it doesn't get any worse. Does she think in her childhood studies, which that apparently is her subject, has she ever thought about SEN children? Has she ever thought about disabled or emotionally disturbed children? Sexually abused children? She doesn't think about children. She doesn't care about children, basically. All she cares about is getting up that greasy pole, getting a nice little position.
Yeah.
And she's supposed to be an expert. So on the topic of mental health, let's start with a quick wander around some mental health statistics for 15 to 16-year-olds in England. And believe you me, that's a very critical time for a child's development.
Yeah.
In a 2016 paper published by no other than the Royal Society of Psychiatrists, entitled "The Scandal of the Underfunded Child and Adolescent Mental Health Services." And here are some quotes. Some local NHS areas are spending less than £10 a head on the mental health of children and young people in their communities. £10. There are 52 clinical commissioning groups in England that are allotting less than 5% of their total mental health budget to services for children and young people between 15 and 16 years old. 1 in 10 children of this age group has a diagnosable mental health disorder. 1 in 10. I bet it's more by now, I bet it's far more. More than half of all adults with mental health problems were diagnosed in childhood, and less than half were treated appropriately at the time. Less than half. So all this means by now that we have a high number of traumatised adults who are becoming parents. Nice one. Some will do a great job, but the odds would seem to be stacked against them. Will it ever end? All this trauma? Why weren't those kids an urgent priority? If we're a nation of children lovers, why not? It doesn't seem to be the case. And still, Timothy Winters forgives us. He still thinks he's one of that club, No Child Left Behind. Do you remember them? The bright new privileged generation of the 21st century, according to our educationalists. And didn't it sound grand? I mean, what kind of person would leave a child behind? What heartless people would want to do that, for goodness sake? But it seems okay to leave them desperate. That seems fine. All this carnage and distress for the want of what? Few measly quid, basically. And that has so often been the case that a pattern has to be emerging. It's all about money. From the shameful care home abuses up and down Britain, money and ideology. The care home cases up and down Britain, which we've all found so disgusting. And we all thought, my God, heads are going to roll. Theresa May said, heads are going to roll. Did they? Did a single head roll? And what happened to all the files? They just seemed to disappear down people's trouser legs. A third of them, from what I believe. And we're standing for this. We as a people are standing for this. There's something very wrong. In Belgium, I don't know how many it was, I've seen different amounts, but when they had the Dutroux case in Belgium, you might have heard of it, it was a terrible scandal. There were thousands and hundreds of thousands of people in Brussels marching on the street. The government had to do something at that stage. And how do files manage to disappear in an age of photocopiers, for goodness sake? They've been around a long time, even in the 80s. So there's no justice, no reparation for these kids. Oh, sorry kids, that's just how it is, but we've written reports and lessons will be learnt if that helps. So they just have to go and crawl away and lick their own wounds and just feel that everyone is against them. Everyone. So how come they weren't taken seriously? How come so much money was spent? They flew a judge from New Zealand. They flew her back again. She got paid some nice fat wage. And what happened to those kids? Nothing. Nothing. I'm going to cut this short fairly soon, but I just want to take a little walk through history just to make you realise the kind of teeth these successive sharks of government have had and how they're chewing up kids. So one of the kindly initiatives I mentioned a while back that the British government introduced to shelter children and keep them from harm, well, one of the earliest I want to refer to is the one of, it sounds like long time ago, but bear in mind my grandma was 10 when this happened, and that's the Boer War. And I'm not going to go into the ins and outs of the Boer War. It was, like any war, it was a very dirty game. And it's always seems to be the kids that carried the trauma. So, basically, one thing that's not contested about this war, which was 1898 to 1902, was that it was one of the bloodiest that the British government had gone to war over. It was a cause that they'd gone to war over. And it was the bloodiest, and it was the longest, and, you know, it's got to be one of the dirtiest. 27,000 Boer women and children died in the concentration camps. And Boer, by the way, for anyone that doesn't know what it is, it's like an ethnicity. They were partly German, partly Dutch farmers that were working away in South Africa. So they were mainly they were taken into concentration camps. These were concentration camps, okay? And make no bones about it. Yeah, I'm being told to wind up. So, it's just that it's so hard because all these are children. And it should be breaking our heart. And these children aren't mentioned. These children aren't mentioned. They don't even get the last post, do they? They don't get their name on a grave, an unknown soldier's grave. They don't get any recognition from our society. And yet we're talking thousands and thousands and thousands. And not just during the Boer War. It happened also, for example, during Operation Pied Piper in the Second World War, where lots of little children were taken from their parents, and much propaganda was put into place in order to do that.
Yeah.
It took propaganda. Why? If parents really thought, my kid is going to get bombed, and I've got to do something about this, and they thought it naturally, I think by hook or by crook, many of them would have done it, and many of them did. But the government had to have, newspapers, they had to have magazines, they had to have a whole arm of propaganda in order to bring that about. And what happened to those kids? No one knows. Their stories are just untold. A lot of them went, a lot of them had a wonderful time. A lot of them became adopted, not a lot, but some. And it was hunky-dory. For some people had never seen the countryside before. But for others, it was the worst time of their life, and they could tell no one. They couldn't come home and tell the parents. It was just, again, they're nameless soldiers in a war against children that has always been going on. And I've got so much more to say, but so has Kim, and so has everyone else. But I just want you to think about that. You know, why are we allowing it to happen? Have we got cross-generational trauma? We've all got trauma in our own lives. The government is causing PTSD amongst everyone now. We need to heal ourselves.